Please welcome. Just going to start up with our prayer. You could partake or you could just remain silent for a second. Face the east, 5 on the left, 2 on the right. Allah, Father of the universe, Father of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Allah is my protector, my guide, and my salvation. By night and by day, to His holy prophet, Noble Islam. Just going to read our letters to be read every meeting. Prophet warns all Muslims, governors ordered to read proclamation at each meeting. I hereby inform all members that they must end all radical, agitating speeches while at work, in their homes, or on the streets. We are for peace and not destruction. Stop flashing your cards at Europeans. It causes confusion. Remember, your card is for your salvation. Failure to obey these orders will be of severe consequence. We are for love, truth, peace, freedom, and when these principles are violated, justice must then take its course. Any member or group of members who hold malicious feelings toward the temple or the prophet, or violate the divine covenant of the Moorish movement, will receive their reward from Allah for their unjust deeds. All true Moors will and must obey the law as laid down to them by their prophet. If they lose confidence in their prophet, they should turn in their card and button, cease wearing their turban and fez, and return to the state where I, the prophet, found you. This is a holy and divine movement founded by the Prophet Noble Ali. And if the prophet is not right, the temple is not right. The prophet, therefore, is sending out a divine plea to all Moorish Americans that they do their part in protecting their prophet and the temple. This is an everlasting movement founded by the prophet through the will of Allah to redeem his people from their sinful ways. Noble Ali. To be proclaimed at every meeting. Islam. I am glad to know that I have a few faithful Moors among you all, and I desire for them to know the truth and the divine truth. There is a host of jealousy about me and the movement now by the same people of our side of the nation that claim that I was only a joke and unreal. But now, since they have found out from the government officials and the nations of the earth that this is the only sole foundation that all Asiatics must depend upon for their earthly salvation as American citizens, they are working every scheme that they can to disqualify me so they may take charge of the situation. I have notified all these things to you long ago in the past. It is through the faithful Moors that attribute to the movement and uplifting funds. The ones that paid their divine respect to me and the movement will be remembered. That is why I am calling upon all faithful Moors to increase their faithfulness to me, your prophet, and your divine Moorish movement. I need finance and I need it badly. Never before have I needed finance so badly as I do at present, so I can shove aside the discord that is facing the nation. It all comes through jealousy because of my fame and nobility. The nations of the world will not recognize the movement without I, the prophet, being head. It has been proven by my works which I have performed in the past few years. Prophet Noble Ali. To the members of the Moorish Science Temple of America. Islam. This is the instruction from your Prophet Noble Ali. Be faithful unto your forefathers' divine and national creed, that you would be blessed for your good deeds that you sow in the flesh. Allah is the one that judges the world, and his judgment is now on, but the weak can comprehend it not. The end of time is drawing near, so says Allah to his divine prophet, I, Noble Ali. And that's why many hearts have been turned to stone, many have eyes to see but cannot see, ears to hear but cannot hear, lest they would be confounded of their sins. These are trying hours now, dear Moors, and every evil spirit is moving, and they are trying every weak mind to overthrow and drag out the true foundation that has been laid, and to cause confusion in the minds of the ones that do believe. But if you have the true love of Allah and the spirit of your forefathers, you fear not what you hear or see, but would sacrifice the utmost of your very life to protect your movement and your prophet. Watch your enemies, dear Moors. Your enemies are the ones that speak against your prophet and ridicule him to the very lowest, and the ones that speak against your divine and national principles of your temples. Act accordingly, and Allah would bless you for your good work. Peace, your divine prophet, Noble Ali. Peace. Islam.
Vocês vão para o
Energy was too high last week. Today, what we wanted to touch on was These are trying hours now, dear Moors, and every evil spirit is moving, and they are trying every weak mind to overthrow and drag out the true foundation that has been laid, and to cause confusion in the minds of the ones that do believe. There's been a lot of different nations speaking with regard to what it is that we're presenting, and there's been a lot of confusion as to what side do the Europeans take, them being for this and then the ones being against this. So we wanted to put out some articles today dealing with the colonization of the Americas, which includes Canada and everywhere else that Europeans sort of took a part in saying they're controlling it or they have power or whatever the case is. The fact remains that the people misclassified, Negro, Black, colored, Canadian, or whatever like that, all those people's descendancy is part of the original people of the planet. So anywhere that our people go, we're the Aboriginal people there. The issue is that the people who are there or here or wherever, they've adopted colonial ideals. And once you adopt certain things, even if it's a sliver, right, you're giving them certain power that doesn't really reside with them like that. The mother brought up a question earlier about IDs and having Canadian stuff versus having Moorish things. One of the lessons is learning to live within contracts. So anything that is signed by us, anything that somebody says here, sign here, and a signature goes on it, or two signatures or whatever, it's a contract. So learning to live within contracts means that anything that you're doing with regard to sign here going forward is reserving your rights on those things. So for example, with license, passport, all these different things, you would start by making sure before you sign it, you're writing on the line, all rights reserved on the line, and then you sign over that, so that the rights that you have by proclaiming your nationality and saying that, well, I'm not Negro, Black, colored anymore, I'm a Moor. Now rights happen, rights are invoked. And all the civil rights stuff that they've been fooling us thinking that those are rights, all that stuff's tossed out and doesn't really apply, because there's a difference in status with the individuals. The Negroes, Blacks, coloreds, or whatever, they don't have any rights. That's why they keep getting privileges. That's why they keep getting civil rights and things relative to somebody's giving them something, opposed to something that they're born with. So the whole point of this avenue is so that we get back to that place where the rights that exist are actually peace, more Islam. The rights that exist are actually being invoked by us, right? By our existence, they're being invoked. By our language, they're being invoked. By our dress code, they're being invoked. And part of the issue with the rights not getting recognized is because you have all these different elements that are taking the position of trying to make it look like what the Moors are talking about isn't where it's at. What the Moors are talking about is going to get you arrested. What the Moors are talking about is, the police are going to be knocking your door and whatever, when that's not even close to what's going on. Our land all across the planet has been colonized by foreign people, whether they're foreign people who look like us or foreign people that look like modern European. people are in lands that aren't theirs, and they're making rules and making laws and doing all these things to put off to the world as if they're in favor with law and all these things when they're not, right? Yeah. So with regard to the this thing of them colonizing and then making colonization be the way that things are. Over the years, there's been the indigenous ideals being presented. Truth and Reconciliation Commission, making sure that they acknowledge the indigenous people and the treaties that they did and whatever like that. All that for maybe the past maybe 50, 60 years has been just conjecture. It hasn't been anything that their stamp of approval is on it, that they acknowledge these things. The other part of it is that majority of the people who they say are the natives aren't really the natives. It ain't them. They're foreigners too to this land. And the real foreigners are the Negro black colored people, who they label them that because as soon as they start telling them they're indigenous, now all that reserve stuff and all that stuff goes out the window. Now they have to acknowledge that Regent Park is a reserve, and Flemington Park's a reserve, and Jane and Finch is a reserve, and all these places that they call the black communities or whatever is actually reserved, because those are the indigenous people, not the people who they've been saying are the indigenous people, right? And if anybody has any questions come up, feel free to just put those questions out, and we'll be all right. So in order to put on the appearance of they're doing something, they just passed the bill C-15, dealing with Canadian law being aligned with indigenous law, with the indigenous rights, the indigenous declarations of the UN, where the last time that was in the conversation was when Harper was in power, and after Barack signed on to the declarations, then Canada signed on to the declarations, right? That was Stephen Harper time, and then that wasn't really the seal of approval. That was more sort of like placate the Indians, make them feel like something's happening or whatever the case is, but it didn't really do anything because you just see they found the bodies and all that stuff a little while ago, right? So part of a lot of this thing happening with the UN declarations and Canada law sort of doing this is because of the activity of Moors. Because indigenous people don't even talk about UN declarations or whatever. They talk about the treaties that they have with them, and they keep violating the treaties. And the UN declarations is like a secondary thing that they bring up, right? But they're gonna go to, well, we had a treaty with them to do this, to do that, or whatever. When the fact that they're not the indigenous people, and the fact that the European colonists aren't the government, calling those treaties legitimate are a farce in itself, because they can't be legitimate treaties because the parties that are involved with them, both of them are foreigners. And if they are making treaties, it should be limited to wherever they're from, as far as the person given the treaty and then the person accepting the treaty, right? Regardless of where they're from, that's where that stuff applies. It doesn't apply anywhere else. So they passed this bill, and we just want to go over some of that so you can get a perspective. of the steps that they're taking in order to give a window, give an opportunity for the indigenous people to state their claim. Because this is not some stuff that's going to last forever, right? They're making a claim that Bill C-15, Canadian law, is now in harmony with UN declarations. And then they're going to step back and shut their mouth and see who's going to pick up on what they just did, or who's going to neglect it and carry on with the stuff that we've been carrying on with that gets us nowhere, right? So bill to align Canadian law with UN Indigenous rights passes to become law. The Senate has passed Bill C-15, which seeks to align Canadian law with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which the global body adopted in 2007. The long-anticipated legislation passed the upper chamber by a vote of 61-10, with 9 abstentions. While the bill is often described as enshrining UNDRIP into law, it would not actually directly implement the Declaration's various articles into Canadian law. Rather, it will establish a framework for their implementation. The legislation spells out how the government must take all measures necessary to ensure that the laws of Canada are consistent with the UN Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous People, and must prepare and implement an action plan to achieve the objectives of the Declaration. The federal government will have to present annual reports to Parliament on the progress made in implementing the action plan in consultation and cooperation with Indigenous peoples. Seeing Bill C-15 pass will fulfill an election commitment by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, though previous attempts to enshrine UNDRIP into law were made through private members' bills advanced by former NDP MP Romeo Saganash. In a joint statement, Justice Minister Lamenti and Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Carolyn Bennett called the passage of the Bill C-15 a critical step recognizing, promoting, protecting, and upholding the human rights of Indigenous peoples in Canada. This legislation will require the Government of Canada to examine federal laws, policies, and practices, and to take all measures in consultation and cooperation with Indigenous people to ensure consistency with the Declaration. It provides the foundation of transformational change in Canada's relationship with Indigenous people. The bill is now awaiting royal assent before it fully becomes law, alongside a few other bills that have passed both the House and Senate recently. With wide speculation that an election would be imminent, there are a handful of key bills still moving through the House and Senate that the federal government is looking to see pass into the final few days of the spring Parliament session. Now, you know that they prorogue or cancel Parliament until the election. So again, all these things happening are for the Indigenous people to get themselves in order so they can start governing themselves. Because they can't say we're passing a bill to acknowledge the rights of Indigenous people, which means them governing themselves, and then there being a government still. This is why things happen when they do with regard to quote unquote Canada. Because the whole point is to make sure that they don't lose their footing that they have, their colonial position, right? They want to be recognized as who they say that they are. They want to recognize that the land is what they call it. They want to recognize that the laws are what they created. But then as soon as Indigenous people start talking up, they don't want to hear them. As soon as Indigenous people start standing up for what is contrary to what they present as the law, they want to say Indigenous people don't know what they're talking about. And they want to get this assimilated attitude amongst the Indigenous people that it's all right to, do the both sides. But you could only do the both sides, like we're saying, if you're protecting the rights that you have. So when you go over on that side, they're not violating it, right? Because the whole position is them never being held for the stuff that they did. They always do whatever they do, and then some people are gonna go, protest on a railway, and then they think they got something, or they pass a bill, and the people think that they got something. But then you look around, indigenous people still don't got water. Detroit still don't got water. Right? Yeah. Yeah. Well, we did something, or we apologized, but the real work that needs to be done to fix these issues isn't being done. And the only reason it's not being done is because the people aren't speaking up for it. The people, if they are going to speak up for it, they're speaking up from a status which is Indian, which they don't have rights under that. First Nations, they don't have rights under that. Negro, black, colored, whatever, came over on slave ship, don't have rights under that. The different tribal names that they want to use, they don't have rights under that. All those brand names put you in a position of being subject to somebody else. Puts you in a position of not being able to handle your own affairs, so others have to handle the affairs for you, right? Any questions thus far, or comments?
One, then they say they in Parliament, right? But yet they put this bill to pass for the summer, for the spring.
Mm-hmm.
What's the procedure now in between?
Oh no, yeah,
everything is shut down. So
yeah.
Means even though they say, hey, we passing this bill, but here they come and
they had passed it before they did the shutdown last week.
Okay,
yeah, they passed it already. Yeah, they passed it already. They passed it right before it closed. I think.
So now is our position now to do what we have to do.
Right. And that comes with the people having the knowledge of what the UN declarations of indigenous people are, reading through those, having the people understand what those rights are, that they're inalienable. It's not something that the UN is giving people or whatever. It's acknowledged rights that indigenous people have everywhere in the world. And like they said, the UN body agreed to it. Not only the UN body, but the Organization of American States, they also have a Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People that has to do with the Americas, not everywhere else. So there's two indigenous declarations that are coming from world governments right now that Moors can start using. They should have been using them already. It's not something, now that they passed this, now we're gonna do. It's something that Moors been doing, right? And which is why we're saying, we're giving acknowledgement to the Moors who have been writing their writs and making their phone calls and faxing and whatever it is that they're doing, because obviously the word's getting out. If these colonial people are taking the position of adopting certain things of an international nature, because they don't do that. The practice of the colonials is not to acknowledge international law. So, for example, they have the UN Declaration of the Rights of Human Beings, and the colonial powers here said human rights code. They're going to make up a human rights code to parallel the international human rights. But if they have the human rights code, then that means that it's not a law. It's just something that they created in order to make it look like they're for this. Because if they were for it, they would just implement the UN declarations, right? Off the top, they would just say, oh, well, we're going to follow that as the law, right? But they know that the people don't have the capacity to even make those declarations manifest, because the people are taking the position of doesn't matter what they call themselves. They can call themselves white people and black people and all these different fictions where rights isn't there. Rights is not included. Rights has absolutely nothing to do with that position of being Canadian citizen, United States citizen, you know, citizen of any one of the West Indian islands. All that is colonial activity, right? All those different flags are colonial jurisdictions. All the names of those places are colonial jurisdictions that once you start using them in that fashion, then that's where the power goes to the one who colonized, not the people who, you know, got independent from colonization, right?
Because you notice when you say you're a republic, you answer to someone.
Mm-hmm.
And we all say, we're independent now, we're independent. But then somebody came looking like us and say, oh, we're a republic. So, but nobody never think to say, because they never know what to say. So who we answering to now, since you're a republic? You see? Who you answering to? But we're a republic. And I didn't know, you know, that's what, and the Americans, the United States, the citizens, they can say we're a republic, but then people don't understand that they're answering to us because the treaty that they send the treaty to the Sudan.
Yeah, yeah.
And that made them a republic, so they have to answer to us.
Right.
And we don't
Right.
get it.
You think they have to answer to Donald Trump and Biden?
Right, yeah,
No, but you see,
yeah. And then that's the same thing
so
with here
we're
too.
talking about that, right? Because like growing up in Guyana, I always question that, but I never know
Yeah,
that I could look somewhere and find it. I say, okay, these guys were pushing for independence. They get independent in 1966.
yeah,
So when you come 4 years later in 1970, it's we're a republic.
yeah,
In the whole it festered on we're a republic now. And everybody had
yeah,
been independent.
yeah, yeah. Under the guise that they're independent when they're not.
Yeah, but remember, you know, as I say, like when in Guyana, they liberate themselves.
Mhm.
We call it the village. My great grandfather from my grandmother's side, they bought that.
Yeah,
Whoever they bought it from. But it wasn't the Guyanese government. They bought that land. So they say we hope people come here and we become a town. So they call it Hope Town. You see the people like Buxton, the people bought that. Like certain place, they bought that. So now here's from somebody, when you become a republic, they will gonna happen. Now that people just, you know, some tax on this. And nobody never questioned it.
mhm.
So I before all of this, I always question things like this. So I used to ask my mom, even my cousin there, attorney, but we call them liars, right?
Yeah.
I say, I realize that we rates and tax. Because we say, we didn't buy this. Because, you know, we come from another place and we call it being out because we didn't go to buy this place. And the people start coming. So most people you can't trouble them because you found it, right? Because when they bring the people forward, they were, you know, they were advocating some of these because people were running away from. And as you say, some of those people that run were the people that they brought, but the people that were set for there were always there. You know, we're talking about indigenous people.
Mm-hmm.
So as I say, when you say republic, you ask me, you want to not questioning yourself.
And remember too that even though they say republic, most of the time that's a democracy disguise. Because it's actually democracy.
Yeah.
Right? It's actually mob rule. But if they get the people to think that, well, because they say Republican form of government and Republican Party and all that stuff, they're thinking that there's there's these two sides, when it's really one side democracy, which is really supposed to be republic, where it's the people who are the ones making the decision. But if the people don't have a status, then there ain't no republic, because the people don't even acknowledge it. You know what I mean? So for example, acknowledge it would be like I can't remember where it was, but there was a protest. Right? This is like, for example, sign that you know it's a republic, right? That the people rule. There was a protest, and while they're protesting, all the riot police took off their stuff and joined the people. That's how you know it's a republic, right? So they said the people who are in front of us right now. They're the people. The people who are in front of us right now, they're the people who we serve. We don't serve the people who give us a paycheck. And if these million people are out here, if they really decided to tear this place up, why should we as police, there's 20 of us out here, get our ass beat by these people? Why? You guys not paying us that much. You know what I mean? So we're taking off all our stuff and we're gonna go join the people and protest with them. Right? Because those are the people. Right? And that should be the same thing with all the people in the governmental offices or whatever like that. Take off their little title and then go down there, join the people. But then they lose their.
But then, people looking at that. But then you see, if they all follow suit, then those people.
And somebody said that was in France where they did that.
Okay,
right? And that's a European spot. So if these Europeans who went around the world, colonized places and all that stuff, colonize up here, call it Quebec and all that stuff, is French speaking and whatever like that, but then they're gonna stand up for Republican form of government and the people be in the government, then we know that these people know what's up. You know what I mean? And the problem is our people don't know. That's why we're getting taken advantage of the way we are. You know, because it should be something that we should know. Right? More is even saying also Italy is another place where, you know, they took off their stuff and they said, yo, we're joining the people, which is what it should be. The people be in the government, and then whatever the people dictate is what the quote unquote representatives of the government is going to do, right? That's why they always call them that, representatives of the government, because they're not the government, people are. But the people have no idea what government is, how to be government, what implies that you're government or anything. All they know is, well, I voted for that guy, so that means I guess he's the one that we should be. Yeah, right. He's gonna make it better. Yeah, you know. Yeah. Any questions? Questions, comments?
So this is what you just talked about. Right?
Yeah.
What is the time frame? Like how much time frame do we have for us to actually as an Indigenous society?
Well, based on the individuals that are Indigenous, they should have been doing that. They should have been implementing what they're supposed to implement. And then this thing coming up is only gonna back their position. It's only gonna support them, right? Like this is not something, the bill isn't for the law to be acknowledged. The law is already acknowledged. This is the actual quote unquote government saying we acknowledge it. But it's been acknowledged way before that. They're just taking the position so that it's in line with the truth and reconciliation that's happening. Because they know one, that they're colonists, And they know too that it's the pressure cooker is whistling right now. So you're either gonna run it under the water or you're gonna open it on the stove, right? They don't want it to be open on the stove. They don't want this thing to bust and everybody have to deal with it. They want to sort of put it over here and deal with it quietly, reserved, so that it doesn't draw or garner too much momentum. Because once the indigenous people realize what is going on, then they're automatically supposed to get on board with what they're claiming that they're tying themselves to, right? You know, the indigenous people have to be the ones to start implementing. It can't be waiting for the colonists to do it, you know, as they have been. Because when the colonist does it, just like it was done, right? Now the indigenous people are looking at it and they're still playing waiting, when they should be implementing every one of these articles of the UN declarations. They should be putting them on notice, all the different groups that, you know, all this BIPOC and all this stuff, all this BIPOC and all this stuff like that, they're supposed to be starting to adopt that as the reality, not the fictitious things that they've been given as what the law is and what they're supposed to do, and they're supposed to go apply for this grant from the whoever, and then they're gonna get. It's not supposed to be that. All the leaders who are in every single group, the membership of these groups should be going to the leadership. Hey, Canada just passed the bill that they're acknowledging the UN declarations. If we're still saying slaves from Africa and Negro, black, colored, or whatever, then none of this stuff applies. Don't even look at UN declarations, because those things, those labels are limited to people who are property, people who are serfs, people who are slaves to somebody else, people who are minorities, wards. It doesn't belong to the national people, right? And again, the only people who can speak up are the indigenous people. Nobody else could talk up with regard to this bill, right? Only the indigenous people could talk up. But if the indigenous people don't know that they're indigenous and they think that they're something else, then this stuff is going to get swept under the rug and they be complaining for another 50 years about when we're going to get our whatever, and going to parliament to go march for reparations and beg for this and beg for that, when it's all in our hands to get whatever it is that we want. And more so, it's in our hands for us to unify and get ourselves organized. As far as ourselves, having nothing to do with anybody else, because again, we already have the UN declarations and all that. And once you read that and you realize all the different rights that the indigenous people have, you have to ask yourself, then how come, why is there suffering in all this? If they have all this stuff in these articles, 54 articles, and they're talking about everything from right to healthcare, the right to finance from these people, the right to not get vaccinated, right to not be discriminated against, right to not have children taken out of the house, right to a mother to be able to breastfeed, whatever. Everything is there. But if the people aren't even at the place in their mind to recognize who they are and what it is that they have that comes with them when they came out the womb, then our people are in trouble. Which is again part of you know, us doing this, part of Noble Drew Ali's campaign, letting the people know, yo, you're not Negro, black, colored, you got certain rights. These people can't treat you like a slave. But if they do, it's probably because you set yourself up to be treated like that. It's not them being racist or them being discriminatory or them being prejudiced. It's you not taking the position of knowing what rights are, knowing what nationality is, knowing, geography. How many people are going to tell you Canada's not part of North America? It's its own country.
Yeah, they tell me that to my face.
Yeah.
It's its own sovereign nation.
Yeah.
To the queen.
Like how? How is it its own sovereign nation?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Right? Queens on all their money.
Yeah.
They're their own sovereign. But that's the games that the colonists play. Yeah. That's the game that the colonists play. The colonists want the people to think that they're not colonists. Call them Canadian, United States, American, call them everything except colonists.
Yeah. And then when memories they come along, oh, remember our father's soldiers.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not my father's soldiers.
Exactly. Exactly.
Celebrating colonies.
Yeah. 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 And again, the whole thing of put it out there and the people believe it is because of the people not having the knowledge, right? Because they're not studying on their own, so they don't know. They're just going by what's told. And then the actual indigenous people whose leadership is not saying what it is. Whether we look at the indigenous people who's on the reserve, because majority of them will tell you that all their chiefs sold out. They'll tell you that. Oh yeah, all our chiefs sold out. So I don't know why you guys still playing around like they're your chief or whatever. If you know they sold out, shouldn't you be going up there and beating some people's asses or whatever since they sold out? You guys don't have any water, you have no health care, your children are getting stolen, kidnapped or whatever like that, and all you're doing is just going and standing in front of Parliament, that's it. Right? But again, they know that they have the people to such a docile position that anything goes with them, but you let one of these indigenous people try to do something to one of these colonists and see what happens. They're gonna send in army brigade and everybody for this one guy, you know what I mean, who did something.
Remember the Oka crisis?
The what?
Oka,
Yeah.
You want to make a gold post on the people there, bro.
Yep.
Listen,
Comment? Question?
No, I was gonna say like when they bombed up the 9, the people in the Philadelphia, was it?
Yeah. Move. Yeah.
Bombed
Move 9. Yeah. And do they're able to do that because those people were claiming some Africa stuff, claiming some black thing, but then want rights. And that should be a sign. Rights don't apply. Even though their base was on a street that's an indigenous name, which shows that there's a contradiction. Because how are you living on an indigenous street talking about you're from Africa, right? It's near incompetence to be looking at it like that. If we had some Europeans talking about Jamaican patties, and then all Jamaicans are going to them to go get Jamaican patties when you know that those are Europeans. That's exactly what's going on. Because the people don't know their own stuff. So they're going with whatever it is that's presented, thinking that it's presented out of goodwill, or it's presented out of, help the people, or it's presented out of, when it's actually presented to keep you under colonization. It's actually presented to make sure that you assimilate. And then once you assimilate, then they got you. Again, because they shouldn't even be able to get you still. At this point, We should know. We should see those people coming way down there. Like, oh, here they come. They're about to try this, and every time they try, they get checkmated. Every time they get checkmated. Everything they try, checkmate. You know, but
yes, because like one realizing now, once you call yourself outside of who you are, they really truly got let down at you. But it's like what I was thinking just now when you say that with Philadelphia, the Black Panther, remember when they attacked them?
Yeah.
What they call themselves Black Panther. Yeah. So they're like, we can do what we want. These guys just, they didn't even know we got, so we just get rid of them.
Do what we want, yeah.
Because they get rid of you as a Moor, as a sovereign person. They not thinking, when you think it, we got to get rid of these people because they wake up and become more and say who they are, come back in the sound, we'll be in big trouble because they out here already. They publicize it in. So there's nothing there for you to do, right? Because you call yourself black.
It's still my child.
Who's gonna help you?
Yeah.
You say there's no black nation on the earth, there's no black people on the earth. So who these people we just wipe out? But they call them, black people. Okay. Nothing don't come of it. No, but nothing can come of it.
Yeah. Just that claim alone. Yeah.
That's like I really sit on I'm getting it now.
Yeah. But again, that same thing that you're saying, oh yeah, you're getting it now, is because of the studying. Because once you realize that the narrative that's been presented is false, and then you have conflicting stuffs to the narrative that you research on your own, why would you go with the narrative? You know what I mean? If you can do your research and find out that I'm not black, whatever you research, you found out that you're not black, right? Then people who call themselves black, they obviously have problems, because this is not some hard stuff to find out. This is some basic stuff to find out that we're not black, that we didn't come here on slave ships or whatever. It's basic to find that out, right? But our people don't even take that position to know for real, know thyself. Know thyself is just some taboo statement that people just say. Oh yeah, I know myself because they use shea butter and plantain soap, so they know themselves. You know what I mean? Well, that's not anybody could use that soap. It ain't no big deal. You know what I mean? Anybody could use neem, right? But there's an actuality of know thyself that has to do with the individual's mind frame changing. And that's only going to be done by the individual. Somebody's not going to come and do that for them. They're going to be the ones to study, think about stuff, ponder, consider, and now you're going to make a decision based on what you found out. And majority of times, we're going to find out that our own's been telling us BS for a very long time, and we've been going with it. Europeans been telling us BS for a long time. We've been going with it. And again, as we go through some of these articles about colonization, this is not some derogatory thing that we're doing. They call themselves colonists. We're not calling them colonists as, not to call them Canadian or not to call them, no, they're colonists. They know that they're colonists. They acknowledge that they're colonists, right? They know that they're colonists.
History books,
You see people being so caught up in that when you programming.
They say, oh, I can just be one, but they don't want to be one. They want to control it. That's the problem. And so now you have to know yourself, because they're not going to be able to do it.
right? What you need to know, oh no, sorry, colonization, European colonization of the Americas killed 10% of world population and caused global cooling. January 31st, 2019. While Europe was in the early days of the Renaissance, there were empires in the Americas sustaining more than 60 million people. But the first European contact in 1492 brought diseases to the Americas, which devastated the native population. And the resultant collapse of farming in the Americas was so significant that it may have even cooled the global climate. So Europeans come into land that's not theirs, bringing whatever they brought with them, killing animal life, plant life, people, caused the collapse of farming on this side of the world. And then again, once it happens in one place, then it's easy for it to happen everywhere else, right? And again, this is just from them leaving where they're at and coming here. We're not talking about them going out and, you know, murdering people and murdering. We're not even talking about that yet. We're talking about them just being somewhere that they're not supposed to be. Yeah, right? Yeah. You know, you have the somebody tainted the well, right? They're the taint of the well. They're the tainting of the well. Just the fact that they came to land that's not theirs, right? The number of people living in North, Central, and South America when Christopher Columbus arrived is a question that researchers have been trying to answer for decades. Unlike in Europe and China, no records on the size of indigenous societies in the Americas before 1492 are present, right? Unlike Europe and China, no records on the size of indigenous societies in the Americas before 1492 are preserved. So we don't even have a template to use. We don't even have a reference point as to before 1492 what was going on here. It's just based on whatever archaeologists found, whatever Smithsonian found, whatever, you know, any type of European gold rush people, when they came here and they started to move around or whatever they documented is what we have access to as far as what was going on here. We don't have our own records of that because majority of those people aren't even here. Majority of those people are out the way. So it's based in what stories they're telling and then what we go out and research for ourselves to find out what was going on here. Because remember that the time frame of 1492 is pivotal for them and us. 1492 is the first time they left over there to come over here. And 1492 is also the first time that it's alleged we fell over there. This is the acknowledgement of our fall. 1492, that date is what they use. That date is what they use to go from old world order to new world order. That date is what they use to show Europeans staking a claim on the world, right? When they were dealing with this idea of us ruling and them not wanting to accept this fact that we're ruling, they put their different nations together in order to get us out of power. They put their nations together, got together with some of our own people who we had, you know, our own internal conflicts with to get us out of power. Everything that they've done, everything that they're doing is for them to have this quote unquote upper hand in being able to do whatever it is that they want. More so because they have people on our side that also work with them. You see it a lot in the, we talk about it a few times in class, that you have these Europeans that connected with the indigenous people, and then here comes this one indigenous guy with these Europeans bringing them back to the village, showing them through the jungle to get back to the village or whatever like that, showing them where the clean water is at. You don't drink from here, the quicksand's over there, the whatever's over there, you know, and then bring them in,
And they taking the place.
right? Mapping out everything, right? Thank you very much. You know what I mean? I'm just gonna go over there, go to the river that we read, and then you're gonna go call all the boys, and then they're gonna come rape, pillage the whole community, right? And then they have nothing. And then the ones sell out, they probably kill him too, because they know that you can't trust him because he's a sellout, right? You're gonna sell your own people out, like what the hell, right? You know?
You know, so with that, when they brought it, like I say, the Norwegians, when they brought it to my country, they made a deal with them in English. They say, you go into the land of El Dorado gold, you're gonna hit water on the floor, you pick it up.
Yeah.
So here they're giving them 2 pieces.
Yeah.
If you find this place with gold on the floor, why do you bring it? Why you don't pick it up and keep it?
Yeah.
And they got one of their own.
Yeah.
To one of the old Norwegians to tell the people to come. That's why they outnumber, and people don't think that, like, for that area, so the area you find they outnumber the indigenous people, right?
Yeah.
Because they brought them in, and you know they put that label on them, and that label is called slave. That they call themselves when they sing about.
This is the story of the cult.
The word.
Yeah.
And then the one guy at the end, they pick him up and bring him.
Yeah.
They couldn't leave him. Right? So now when they bring him, they had him there. There's a documentary called British Guiana 1838. He got the couple go PC and race up on the fence, and they telling him, look, of course. There's no, look, we are working. We are on the plantation because the Moors are free themselves.
Yeah.
Now we come to replace the Moors. You know, they were another set of Moors, but he said out. And how they kill him. Because your own now know you recognize you with this. And he just like this. He died broken heart. He probably just said, oh no, take me. You know what he's making?
Yeah.
Talking because at one point in the thing they say you can go to Maroon Town, you're gonna get help.
Yeah.
And we know Maroon means more.
Yeah.
No, yeah, in my country.
What's called
Maroon Town, no, see, that's what I'm saying. So you see how the Moorish thing come together, and there's another place for more. Maroon Town too.
Yeah.
So
Is the end of the Maroon Town? Yeah.
you see, because we never hear about it because growing up, you know, they won't tell us.
Yeah.
But if you into history, you read some big
Little pieces. Yeah.
then you can put it together because you know the older folks in the village, we will see things that sound crazy, and then when I get big, then it makes sense to me. I didn't understand it.
Yeah.
I know I'm on this path. But these people in the bush, we being called bush. And you know, they used to make a distinction He said, "You come on, they come in,
Mhm.
marry them."
Yeah.
So they were telling them, those people that come, don't marry them. But I know, you see, now I'm understanding what it was. You see, the people that come, they were the people come with change.
Yeah.
But those people that were there, they said, "No, no, no."
Yeah, they're not
But
from.
would sell you out.
Yeah.
They're the ones that would turn and sell you out.
Yeah.
And he said they would sell you to master. So they were catching some of these same people that were there. If now you getting it. Because I was telling my sister and I not doing into account. I said I would like you guys to do this maths. How much people we have living here? How much people we have here? And I think most of the population were branches. But on that side,
Right.
Brazilian side.
Yeah.
Most, and then you go to Kayan side. But all this middle passing, they had no one.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's why you find the land there is more swampy. But when you go in, like you head into Venezuela, you find the land is warm. And Colombia, they call it Spanish Guyana, you know. But people, I know Spanish Guyana, there's this little piece that they had, they call it British Guyana. And then the rest is Dutch and the rest is French.
Yeah.
But the good part is that side, and this side. But this, the British says they own this one.
Yeah.
So I'm saying, think about it. How much boat have to come to bring all these people in? Say,
Yeah.
supposed to do the math. If you take me 4 months to walk, and you only bring 250. Now you come down 4 months, you go 4 months, the boat empty. No, name all the islands.
Yeah.
Now do the maths. You think they bring all of us?
Some people still
No,
think that.
no.
Yeah.
No, you have to wake them up because now
But no matter what you say,
when you wake, you gotta wake them
Yeah.
so you can pull your foot.
Yeah.
no matter what, I've encountered people like that. Or I bring the same kind of equation to them. It's like,
Yeah.
no,
But you
someone
have
wants
to, it has something in here.
Because it's the brainwash. You know, the brainwash is deep on our people. The brainwash is deep. Like, you know, like we use the example, if they can see that they're brown and call themselves black, that's brainwash. That's not they don't get what we're saying, or what we're saying is too deep and they can't understand. That's brainwash. You know what I mean? You know, like you're saying, you know, you count the islands. Ain't no way they brought all these people over here. Doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? There's no way. Somebody had a picture. Somebody had a picture of the I think it was like a model of the slave ship or whatever, and how they had the slaves on there, and they had them on there like lined up like this, just lined up. Then the next row lined up. The next row lined up, and everybody, oh, am I taking pictures of it and all that? Like, there's no way. There's no way they brought people over here like that. You know, there's no way. Anybody believing that, it's brainwashed that they have them under.
Yeah, because and the case in point, if you go back and think, like the first Jovidians that came was 100, only 100 came from India, only 100. 90 men, 10 women. You know how long the boat ride from India? No, do the math.
Yeah.
You bring them from India. You see, now we go back to what we're talking, right? So, like, we have slang for certain things, right? And, you know, some of these guys, you will say, them are this. You know, they see a guy with it, and some of them are that. So now when I walk, I realize who were here and who came. And if they ever bring 10,000 people, that was a lot. For them to just say 10,000, that was all. I'm giving them the credit of that amount.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Because, I don't know, like some of the islands and things, you will tell if you can go back in your head, how the people interact, who came and who came and then who.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because like in my country, they like to say religions. But certain areas, they are cooking.
Yeah.
Now they should tell you something that they were always there together cooking, but these ones telling these ones, when separate. And then you got some fools there too. They don't separate here, they run over there with them and separate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because here you can't separate because the pot cooking.
Because you are, yeah.
Everybody, like pillow.
Yeah.
It's cooking. So now when they give you this thing and you're like, okay, let me go over there because you can't sit here. You got a pot cooking. Everybody together.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they have to survive. That's how they live.
Yep. To reconstruct population numbers, researchers rely on the first accounts from European eyewitnesses and in records from after colonial rule was established, tribute payments known as encomiendas. This taxation system was only established after European epidemics had ravaged the Americas, so it tells us nothing about the size of pre-colonial populations. Early accounts by European colonists are likely to have overestimated settlement sizes and population to advertise the riches of their newly discovered lands to their feudal sponsors in Europe. But by rejecting these claims and focusing on colonial records instead, extremely low population estimates were published in the early 20th century, which counted the population after disease had ravaged it. On the other hand, liberal assumptions on, for example, the proportion of the indigenous population that was required to pay tribute or the rates at which people had died led to extraordinarily high estimates. Our new study clarifies the size of pre-Columbian populations and their impact on the environment. By combining all published estimates from population throughout the Americas, we find a probable indigenous population of 60 million in 1492. For comparison, Europeans' population at the time was 70 to 88 million, spread over less than half of that area. Right, so
there was 80 million Europeans in 1400?
70 to 88 million spread over less than half of the area of the Americas.
That's a large population.
Yeah.
But in a small box.
And then remember too.
At that time. This is their
Makes sense.
Yeah, because they have to, in order to.
No, like we have no concept of any of this. Like my parents and my ancestors that were from Ghana, we're from the tribe, and we didn't know anything about slavery until we migrated to this part.
Right.
So like now that people are coming back to the motherland, they're doing this return to Africa, and they're showing them these little caves and stuff. We're just like, what the fuck did this happen?
Yeah, exactly.
Is that in our DNA?
Yeah.
Right. So like when you hear a lot of the Black Americans say, "Oh, let's return to Africa," we're like, we're not the same people.
Yeah. Say that again.
Where you coming to Africa for? When you already think you're that, like it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Right. So like the confusion of how it's being propaganda in the States and they strip them of their own identity and remember who they are. It's like you're trying to identify with something that doesn't mix with them, but they don't know any better. Right. So it's like for me, coming from the motherland descendants and stuff like that, when I meet people here, And they have this perpetual fear of like Caucasians and that inferiority complex. I'm like, you were here before me. Like, I don't understand where that fear comes from, or where the Black Americans feel less superior than you know, like they have this is fear in the DNA that when they see people that look like Lunars, that's what we call them, Lunars, you know what I mean? Like they have a fear for them. And people that are from that part of the world, they don't have that. But then again, through colonization and them coming there perpetuating the white Jesus and stuff like that, that's just savior concept, that's the facts, you know, like the motherland and stuff like that. So like the way they look at white people, they look at them as saviors, whereas in the States, they look at them as oppressors. So it's like the mentality is so different. Whereas, you know, me just coming back from Ghana, like I lived there for about 4 years before I came back here just recently before the corona and stuff. When you go there and you look like me and you're trying to like tell people about themselves, they don't want to hear it. But then a person that look like you per se, no offense taken, you know, you come and you say the same bullshit. It's like, oh
they accept it,
When did the stupidity come? You know, because I just left there like 30 years ago when I first came here at 10 years old, you know, so I'm just like, what happened within that shift? Where within the Aboriginals or the Indigenous people in the motherland, they have no recollection of slavery, but yet it's being pushed on the Indigenous people that look like us in the States, like so hardcore. Like I'm trying to figure out like where that transition, you know what I mean? Because like the DNA remembers everything, right? They go around all over the world digging and finding people that look like us, you know, broad nose, big mouth, and all that stuff. But nobody knows where these Caucasians came from. On top of that, you're telling us that you pick millions of us from like the motherland, put us in spaceship like sardines and shit. But we can't find no spaceship anywhere. We can find the fucking Titanic in the middle of the world. And that makes no sense. You know, so it's like you hear all these things and it's like we don't even want to argue because show me the proof.
Show me the proof. If you can't show it,
you can't show me. You can tell me about everybody else's culture and how they came about. But you can't tell me where your ancestors are. Show me your case. I can go dig up your grandmother and let you know how long you've been on this earth. But they know everything about everybody else, but nobody knows nothing about them. Because like right now, basically, you're just telling that their history started from like the 1400s, but that's not true because the Greeks were in Egypt way before that. So how long did it take them for them to even come up with this construct that we were going to colonize the indigenous people that was on this land?
You know, when you trace them back, you trace back the Romans, that was us. You trace back the Greeks,
that you're talking about, that
was us.
Colonization, it was all Aboriginal people that looked like us.
Yeah, exactly.
So like, where did these people come from? You know what I mean? Like
you could write this one down. Human Artificial by Bobby Hemmett on YouTube. You can look that one up. That one will give you a breakdown of where they came from, as far as, you know, because if we were to Human Artificial, and the lecturer's name is Bobby Hemmett.
Oh, that black man that's only anything.
So
like the stories doesn't make any sense. You know,
but that's part of colonization though, because with colonization, the colonizer is the one who tells the history. You know, colonizer is the one who tells the history.
Write the story for it to fit your narratives, right?
So the whole, you know, just like you're saying, because we deal with people who are nationals of other places, and it's just like the black thing. They, you know, only when they come here did they hear about that. You know, the slavery.
That's what we are like, what the hell is black? What is that? What is African? We don't understand that.
Exactly.
Like, I'm from Ghana, you come to Ghana, and you're like, what are you? They're not going to tell you that I am
African.
African. They'll tell you I am, you know, an Ewe, I am a Frafa, I'm a Kusa, I am, you know what I mean? Like, nobody identifies by any of these westernized terminology that is being used in this part of the world. So like when you leave and you come in and you have to put yourself in a category, like that doesn't make any sense. Which is why, the same people, even though we might look alike and stuff like that.
Which is why majority of the people who come from somewhere else, they go and they set up their own community. so that they don't have that crossing over of these things into their culture.
It's an exploitation, right?
Yeah, right. When you know, that's what everybody, you know, the whole thing with the melting pot and, you know, the multicultural societies and whatever like that. All that stuff is to make sure that there's always new people who can be wards, right? It's not multicultural like that, because majority of the people who have those you know, their own neighborhoods or whatever, they come from somewhere else. They're a colonizer too. They're not from here that they should have their own community or whatever like that. You know, they're also colonizing. You know, because once they leave wherever they're from and they come here and they start adopting the Western mindset of things, you know, it's like when I went back to Tobago in 2017, the thing there was takeout. Yeah, the thing there was takeout, and then anywhere you go that has trees, the gully's eating all the fruits. Fruits for days in the gully. Fruits for days, like fruits just on the tree, just ripen on the tree, rotten on the tree, birds at the tree, picking at stuff on the tree, because these people want, you know, they want Macintosh apple and grapes and White Castle and Kentucky and chocolate bars and things that,
Because
like,
they have that as symbols of wealth.
Yeah,
Like,
that's what the West says it is.
And it's like what it is. So like, food that we think is trash here.
Yeah.
But there, if you don't have money, you can't afford that.
Can't even have that.
So it's like the mentality is completely like, it's flipped.
Yeah.
You know?
Straight worked.
My sister just made it clear to us when we were talking. You made it clear, you know.
Yeah.
But that's true, you know. I went home and one of my friends, he said he has high pressure. And he said, "I'm not eating the food." He said, "Oh, no."
What?
William, that, you know, like let me say, like you walk to go down the street there and it's all bush, but it's farm now. Right?
Yeah.
People used to farm, you need to go, but you know, everybody get new mentality. They have the farm in Tom Bush, so now the man will feed the cook, everything in the bush. So you guys go in and then you clean the bush. You know, we get no snakes, and then so when I ask the man, go and ask. I buy the golden apple, you got you know. I go down and buy my grandmother place, I tell them I come. I pick. Then when we walk back to the road, because you know, down the down, like the street there is red road, so we call it down. And the man said, well, yeah, I said, you know.
Well, it's like that in the motherland, I suppose, if you don't eat fruits anymore, like it's like a status of luxury. Like they made it so expensive that the local people can't afford it because we're catering to the expat community that are coming into the countries and taking over, right? So it's them that want that stuff. So they grow it for them, but for themselves, they don't want that, and they want to be eating like the food in the plastics and you know, like a Coca-Cola and all those types of things that were never part of our culture, but like now it is because that's what we see the foreigners coming into the land and bringing. So like they take, it's just like, you know, Christianity, like they came there, they gave us the Bible, right? So like,
same idea. Same idea.
The real things, right?
Yep, the same idea.
This guy, Jomo Kenyatta, he was put on that, right? Don't you?
Say again?
Jomo Kenyatta, he had a famous quote on that. He said, when the white man come, we had the land, we had the Bible. When the Europeans come, we had the land, we had the Bible. No, we got the land, we got the Bible.
Yeah.
So it was my grandfather too. He had land in Jamaica, it's on the mountains. And then my grandmother, she wanted a better life. So she bring all seven of her youths and come over here for a better life. And then he was healthy. riding a bike up and down the mountain, farming and everything like that for years. Oh, my back, my knees. This, that.
Very active, right? Like, we spend so much of our time just sitting down. Sitting down gives you digestive issues. Whereas when you're somewhere else, you're constantly walking,
constantly moving.
So you're leaner and like body structure wise, and they live longer.
Right.
They might not have like materialistic wealth or anything like that, but like health wise, you're good. But this part of the world, like you sit down 8 hours, you're in school, you work, you come home, you sit down
again.
Like, you're always sleeping, like your body is always constrained. Right. So of course the aging process is going to be completely different because we're inactive. You know?
I said my grandmother is very smart, you know. She left the US at 80, but she used to go every day. She said, "You're not coming back here." Alhamdulillah, this time she don't remember before home. She come outside and she do, but you know anything, the knees is, well, I don't know why the knees is go here, man.
You're inactive, you're not doing anything.
The knees go.
You're not doing anything.
Like me, I have knee pain too. The knees go. So I was thinking maybe the road is hard. Something.
It's because you're inactive. You spend like 16 hours of your time just sitting down.
No, I go to Puree, right? So you know,
yeah, but you're driving.
No, but I'm either no.
That's not enough.
No, but what happened to I do DG, so I have all those chemicals that I gotta write them up, make sure everything set to one. Well, that one was headache, so I quit it. The one where you gotta put them stuff on the plea. You playing with jail time. So I quit that. You guys send the writing there and all that thing.
So back to that, sorry, the bill that you're talking about, how like now they recognize that we're indigenous people in the land and stuff like that, and they're waiting for the indigenous people to bring forth what they want. Like, what exactly are we doing right now? Like, how are we going to take advantage of this opportunity? Because there's always a time limit for everything while we go to the bullshit and all that stuff, right? So what are we doing exactly?
Well, that's for like I said earlier, as far as
because now there's going to be conflict between us and the Aborigines, which means are more from the land, right? Like they think they are.
No, remember that the whole point of the bill is so that Canada looks to the world like they're doing something for the Indigenous people, but it's really the Indigenous people having to do for themselves. It's not really what they say is going on, right? The people who call themselves the government have been parading around like they're the authority. Everybody in the world knows that the authority are the Indigenous people. Everything has to go through them, especially if it's in a position of colonization. But if they have the Indigenous people thinking that they're Negro, black, colored, and then they have some Asian people talking about they're the Indigenous people, then there's no real connection to it. They're just talking because they already know that their created Indigenous people aren't going to be doing it because they're not Indigenous. They're going to take whatever government gives them, and then everybody else who's Indigenous is classifying themselves as Negro, black, colored, and then stuff doesn't apply to them anyways. Has never applied to them.
Bring this bill more into awareness, so a lot of people become aware that they are.
No, it's not. That's what I'm saying. It's not the bill. It's the people.
Right. So yeah. Bring our people into
No,
awareness.
that's what we're doing right now.
We're such a small collective.
Yeah, that's what we're doing right now.
That is kind of like spreading like these nonsense.
Well, like we said, somebody brought up a thing a couple weeks ago about TikTok. TikTok is defeating the Moors because they have a further reach than the Moors do. Well, TikTok has a demographic that they're trying to reach too, and Moors aren't trying to reach that demographic, right? TikTok is trying to reach brainwashed people. We're not trying to reach brainwashed people. We're trying to reach competent people. We're trying to reach people who still have their brain working properly, and their mind working, and their heart working, and their common sense working. and their logic and their reason working. That's who we're looking at as far as, you know, if we're saying go out and reach people or go out and get people. We want the competent ones. The ones who aren't competent, there ain't nothing we could do with them, because you can't.
You can still plant that seed, you know, because it takes a long time for some seeds to germinate.
Yeah.
So we want to deal with things that only germinate right now, and we're leaving a large collective behind.
But like you're saying, planting seeds is doing that. Now, whatever sprouts is going to sprout. Whatever is not going to sprout is not going to sprout. So when we say planting seeds, you know, from certain seeds you get a huge tree. From certain seeds, you're not even getting nothing worth talking about, right? So with the people being where they are in their state of ignorance, that all we could do is plant the seed. The germination is on them. The watering and all that stuff is on them. All we could do is put the seed. And the seed's either going to sprout or it's not. But the thing of, you know, we need 50 million people to wake up and all that, you know, because if we get 50 million people to wake up, about 49 million of those people are only just waking up for the moment. They go back to sleep in a little bit. They're going back to sleep just now, you know. So the deal is the ones who we have, the ones who are on board, we come together and then we disperse, same way that Walter planted the seed and then you came. Is the same thing with you and other people, that you put them on, they're either gonna resonate to this or they're gonna want nothing to do with it. And you know, the other part of the issue is that the attention span of our people is so short that if it's not, you know, music, shoes, sports, or whatever, they're not even they're gonna be glassed over. You start talking too long about certain things, which again is why there's a certain people that we want to be involved. We can't have anybody and everybody involved with this, right? Because this is a personal sojourn for everybody, and some people aren't ready for you know, to face their stuff. You know, some people aren't ready to face their stuff. You know, majority of people, when it's time to take on responsibilities, they're gonna let the dishes pile up a little bit before they do the one dish that's there and save themselves the headache. You know, and we know that our people are in a certain situation where it's hard for them to make it out of whatever situations that they're in, but it's on them to get it out. You know what I mean? All we could do is throw you the life raft while you're in there. We ain't jumping in for you to drown both of us. You know, that's not where we're going. We're gonna throw you something, throw you a rope, throw you a stick, you're gonna pedal your feet or whatever. You're gonna move your hands, you're gonna grab this thing, tie it around your waist, we'll pull you out. But we're not jumping in after you for you to murder both of us. Because then that defeats the purpose of even having the knowledge. You know? And people are gonna look at it, you're abandoning them. Well, no, they abandoned themselves. Because once we throw you the thing and you don't want to grab on, you thought, well, why don't you jump in and save me? No, it's not happening. It's not happening. And again, that's part of even with the colonials, you know, that they knew all they had to do was get one. All they had to do was get one of our people to sell out, and then they got millions from one. You know, look how many people they got to say, look how many people they got to accept that they're African American. When that came from Jesse Jackson, who's a sellout. And everybody knows he's a sellout. And everybody knows he created African American. But you think they're going to stop calling themselves that? No, they're going to call themselves that still. You know? Yeah, yeah. And then somebody else is going to come with something. Yeah. 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 And somebody else is going to come with something else. They're going to jump on that. You know what I mean? But that's where our people are at. So, you know, we say that those who want to learn, doors open. Doors are always open for them to learn. But we can't make people learn. We can't make people know. People have to want to know.
The program is
yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
It's the detoxing, you know. When you detox, you know, some stuff come out that you gotta really tell a man detox, like, why the man run to the why? You know, so that's how it stands, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot. He's like, like somebody who is on stuff when they gotta come out, you know, you got him.
Yeah, they'll fix something.
Yeah, so
yeah.
It is the hard, you know, I tell people, you of your own self have to want it. Like for me, it says save yourself and your family, right?
Mm-hmm.
It says save yourself, then your family. So now, I save myself, now I give the word to you.
Yeah. We
can have that discussion. Anybody around there will have that discussion. I'll say we plan to see. Let's see what they do with it.
Yeah.
So let's see. Like, this is what it is, the product of the day. What knowledge you want, you can go and check it too. But don't believe me. Don't believe nothing I see.
Mm-hmm.
If I just feed you, you're going to believe it. You're going to just keep coming. But if you start reading it for yourself, then it wakes up something within you.
Yeah, you have to do that in their work.
Right.
They don't want to do it.
But it's just a thing of the conscious.
It's a lot of work, right? To do that care and that shadow work and stuff.
Yeah.
Because I see, some of the things I'm reconnecting to now, I heard it as a little kid going around for old people in the village. So like when we, so now I'm realizing that they were always, who they were saying they were you thinking, we are people.
Yeah.
We are people
that educated, so
yeah.
we know better.
Yeah. Yeah. The biggest fool is an educated fool, as they say. Right. Legacy. In recent years, the calamitous consequences of European colonization on Native American life has been emphasized. Man discusses the cultural arrogance that allowed the European settlers not only to exploit the Americas, but to deny that before 1492, the Americas had, quote unquote, no real history, being, quote unquote, empty of mankind and his works. In this view, the people of the Americas lived in an eternal, unhistorical state. Research has helped not only to high levels of achievement in pre-Columbian America in such areas as calendar making and mathematics, but a sophisticated understanding of the relationship between the natural environment and humans. Man resists the temptation to romanticize regarding depicting Indians as green role models, commenting that Native American interaction with their environment were as diverse as Native Americans themselves. However, they did build up, he says, a remarkable body of knowledge about how to manage and improve their environment that retained value. One lesson that the natives learned was that anyone who ever exploited their environment was going to be dead. For example, the Yanoma people of the Amazon have lived for centuries in a way that, quote unquote, has not damaged the forests, using farming techniques that have kept human groups sustainable within the rigid ecological limits of the tropics. On the other hand, the map of the world and humankind's knowledge of the world was transformed by the European colonization of the Americas. Ancient civilizations were conquered and much of their legacy destroyed, but 31 nations, including some of the most stable democracies, have joined the world community. More people have been linked together across the globe. Some of those who settled saw their new societies as tabula rasa, where the principles of justice and equality could be put into practice without first having to dismantle existing non-egalitarian unjust systems. Of course, colonial rule qualified as unjust. However, at least in the case of the 13 colonies, this did not pick up sufficient momentum to withstand revolutionary change. Native American spirituality often reverses nature and saw human as a part of nature. Land was not owned by people. Rather, the people were owned by the land, which was to be respected and looked after. Right? So the indigenous culture that had existed thousands of years here, Europeans came here and reconstructed history, had the indigenous people, the indigenous culture, the indigenous whatever appear as that's not indigenous, that's foreign, and then what they brought is actually what the culture is or what civilization is. So you have, for example, all these different South American countries where they don't want anything to do with US and Canada. They're saying, well, we're going to handle our own affairs, even if it means we don't have Coke, we don't have McDonald's, we don't have fast food store, we have, you know what I mean, lady with the cart, with the snow cone machines and all that stuff. That's what we're going back to. We're going back to, you know, picking our stuff. We're going back to planting our stuff. We're going back to our own Aboriginal indigenous practices. And then as soon as you get to above Mexico, all that stuff is gone. And now you have the same indigenous people that are doing Western idea of living and wanting the things that, you know, make them physically be, you know, look like somebody, but, you know, nature is looking at you like a dumbass, right? And they rather nature scorn them and have Europeans acknowledge them and give them applause and whatever like that. And then when trees see them, trees are falling on them, trying to kill them, trying to mess their cars up or whatever like that, because they don't get what's going on. You know what I mean? Right? You know, missing it completely. The gruesome story of Hannah Duston, whose slaying of Indians made her an American folk hero. On a small island north of Concord, New Hampshire, stands a 25-foot-tall granite statue of Hannah Duston, an English colonist taken captive by Native Americans in 1697 during King William's War. Erected in 1874, the statue bears close resemblance to contemporary depictions of Columbia, the popular goddess of liberty and female allegorical symbol of the nation, except for what she holds in her hands, a tomahawk, in the other, a fistful of human scalps. That is the statue now. Right?
The statue is that?
The statue of Hannah Duston in Concord, New Hampshire.
Okay.
Though she's all but forgotten today, Hannah Duston was probably the first American woman to be memorialized in a public monument, and this statue is one of 3 built in her honor between 1861 and 1879. The mystery of why Americans came to see patriotic heroism in Duston's extreme, even gruesome violence is why she became popular more than 100 years after her death, helps explain how the United States sees itself in world conflicts today. Right, so again, the idea of Hannah Dustin, the first American woman to be memorialized, is a fiction because she's not American. She's a European colonist, right? They put them as Americans so they can steal that power from the Americans who are the actual indigenous people, right? Hannah Emerson Dustin lived in Haverhill, Massachusetts, at a time when disputes among English colonists, the French in Canada, and various Native American nations resulted in a series of wars in the region. Many were sold into slavery. By the late 1680s and the start of Killian William's War, fragments of those southern tribes had joined the Abenaki and other northern New England nations allied with the French to fight the continued expansion of the English colonists to the north and west. Native men conducted raids on frontier English settlements, burning property, killing or injuring some colonists, and taking other captives, either to ransom them back to their families or to adopt them as replacements for their own family members. One night, when the Indian family was sleeping, Dustin, who were not guarded or locked up, armed themselves with tomahawks and killed and scalped 10 of the Indians, including 6 children. They wounded an older woman who escaped. A small boy managed to run away. Dustin and her fellow captives then left in a canoe, taking themselves and the scalps down the Merrimack River to Massachusetts, where they presented them to the General Assembly of Massachusetts and received a reward of 50 pounds. Hannah Dustin never wrote down her story. Most of what we know about her comes from the influential Puritan minister Cotton Mather, who published 3 versions of her tale between 1697 and 1702, embedded in his larger works on the New England history. He described Dustin as a righteous ringleader who had every reason to convince the other captives to act. He stressed the savagery of her Indian captors, providing a horrific description of the murder of her child. They dashed out the brains of the infant against a tree. We will never know the full truth of Dustin's ordeal. Was her baby murdered or did it die? But Dustin's version of the death highlighted Indian violence to justify Dustin's gruesome vengeance. So again, this idea of this colonist who's in land that's not their land, and then she's fighting back against injustices that the so-called Indians put on her. And then she gets a statue and all that stuff, and then indigenous people just have to hold that. When the reality is that she's a colonist. And the fact that she's in land that's not her land is why she got what she got, her baby got what she got, everybody else who got what they got. Because they are, like we said earlier, when the colonials came here, everything changed. Climate changed, you know, how people lived their life changed. Everything changed when they came here. And then now in the change, the remnants of the change that we're living in, they're saying this is society, this is how it's supposed to be. There's supposed to be this and that, and houses and roads and whatever like that, when there's only that because they murdered the indigenous people who were here. If they would have came here and stuck to the 13 colonies where they're supposed to be at, there wouldn't be any race issues going on. There wouldn't be anything as far as these Europeans taking this position that they're taking, because once the 13 colonies are full, they would be going back to where they came from. They wouldn't be in the mainland. They wouldn't be going wherever it is that they want. They would be limited to where it is that they're supposed to be. The only reason that they're where they are is because of these treaties, these arrangements, these meetings that they had with people who they say are the indigenous people that have this position The Europeans are on top now, and then everybody else has to be under them. When everybody knows that those people are the minority, not just here, but all over the planet, they're the minority. How is it that they're in a major position and they're a minority? Because they have people who are on our side assisting them in hopes that they're going to have that high rank in society because they help these colonists. When colonists is going to get rid of them as soon as they're done with them. As soon as they use them to get what they want, they're going to get them out of the way. And then they already got the other people out of the way, so colonists could kick his feet up and he could chill. No different like what stuff going on in South Africa. Then these people start busting these people's head open, and now they're mad and they're complaining to people, oh, they can't do this because, you know, the Africans up. No, you're not African, you're European. You know, Africans that are European in Africa. That's not a reality. That's only a reality in the fictitious world history that these people have perpetuated to make themselves feel like they have a position in the world when they really don't have a position like that. Everything they got, they stole. Everything they got, they colonized. And like the mother was bringing up earlier, if we go back to Russia, Germany, England, Britain, Poland, all these places where people who look like us and we rule there, where do these people come from? Where they just pop up from and now they rule the world. You know, right? No. Yeah. And again, you know, that's their story. That ain't no stuff that we're saying. Yeah, most definitely. Yeah.
They'll see it and be like, I want to eat you. Like, literally, like, they like our meats for some reason. It's like, that's what people up there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, they eat. They're like, yeah, that food tastes good. Like, you guys give us energy.
Yeah. Yeah. There's and again, all those stuff is what they took from over there and they brought over here. You know what I mean? That whole lifestyle that they brought over here. That's why they have chocolate bars. You know, because that's the brother's penis. That's why they have all their weapons. You know, you gotta load them and shoot stuff out just like a penis and all that, because this is where they're at in their mind. You know what I mean? Yeah. You know, but like you're saying, not just that, because they also took our heads and kept those. You know, they also took women's breasts and kept those. You know, putting stuff in jars and keeping people's tongue and eyes and whatever like that, because that's what they do. Dahmer put people in the fridge. You know what I mean? They knew that this is part of their culture. They knew that it's not really going to be accepted like that in the capacity that they wanted to do it. So, you know, they create things, you know, call it eating animals. But all that stuff comes from us being the delicacy, not them eating animals. You know, animals were a substitute because they couldn't eat us anymore. You know, yeah, yeah. You know, like when they show all those slave stuff of people lynched and burning and stuff like that. That wasn't just burn them. That's dinner. Like,
that was barbecue. Right?
Yeah, yeah. You know what I mean? That's picnic. That's where the picnic come from. You know, pick a nigger day. You know, and then who barbecues more than anybody else around here? You know, eating ourselves. You know, and again, going back to the thing that, you know, we don't even know and don't care to know. You know, and as soon as you start bringing up something that challenges our people's narrative that they've been given, now they want to lynch you and eat you.
Yeah.
You know. Efforts to commemorate Dustin began in earnest with the acceleration of Western expansion in the 1850s. The first monument, built in Haverhill in 1861, was a marble column. Engravings on its side told the story of the barbarous murder of Dustin's baby and her remarkable exploit. The column was topped by an eagle, symbol of the American nation. The monument's builders, however, never fully paid for it, and in August 1865, it was stripped and resold to another town as a Civil War memorial. The second monument, 1874, New Hampshire, Haverhill built the last monument in 1789 as a replacement for the repressed column. This time around, Dustin, in long flowing hair and a gown, held a tomahawk in one hand and pointed the other outward in accusation, both highlighting her violence and suggesting that responsibility for it lay elsewhere. The scalps were gone. At its installation, the philanthropist who donated money for the statue emphasized its patriotism, stating that the purpose of the monument was to remember Dustin's valor and to animate our hearts with noble ideas of patriotic feeling. Right. So when you hear all that patriotic stuff, that means kill you. When you start talking be patriotic and all that, you're not talking about standing up for rights and whatever. They're talking about kill the indigenous people when they say patriotic. As long as the so-called Indian problem continued, Dustin remained an important historical figure. Her story presented as moral justification for American expansion into Indian lands and into Mexico. But by 1890, officials had pronounced the frontier closed. The Indian population had reached a historic low, and the US government confined virtually all natives who remained in the West to reservations. The Indian problem was over. The nation reassessed its attitudes toward Native Americans, and public interest in Dustin's story plummeted correspondingly. The tale disappeared from textbooks and popular culture, but the actions still remain.
What did they used to call themselves before they colonized calling them Native Indians?
What did the Native Indians?
Yeah, what were they called?
Yeah, it's just like where you're at, by their tribe. Because they're by their tribal name. They definitely didn't call themselves Native Americans. They didn't call themselves Indians, because this isn't India. And anything that's somewhere first is indigenous. So that's a like a more generic thing. Plants are indigenous, and fish are indigenous, and people are indigenous. But more so, they would identify themselves by whatever tribe they belong to. Yeah. Any comments, questions? Any questions, sis? Sure. So we're just gonna do our holy book reading. So if you have your red book, the Mysteries of the Silent Brotherhood book, take a piece out of that today. Mysteries of the Silent Brotherhood, chapter 5. Chapter 5, Yahushua again and his first year of divine ministry. Chapter 5. Oh, my bad. My bad. Chapter 19. Joshua takes the 6th degree and passed the 6th adept chamber of the Eastern sages. Few students ever entered these rooms. The priests guarded them with awe and called them halls of mysteries. When Joshua had attained the victory over fear, he gained the right to enter here. The guide led on the way, and after passing many richly furnished rooms, they reached the hall of harmony, and there was Joshua left alone. Among the instruments of music was a harpsichord, and Joshua sat in thoughtful mood inspecting it, when quietly a maiden of entrancing beauty came into the hall. She did not seem to notice Joshua as she sat and mused, so busy with his thoughts. She found her place beside the harpsichord. She touched the chords most gently, and she sang the songs of Israel. And Joshua was entranced. Such beauty he had never seen, such music he had never heard. The maiden sang her songs. She didn't seem to know that anyone was near. She went her way. And Joshua, talking with himself, said out, "What is the meaning of this incident? I did not know that such entrancing beauty and such queen-like loveliness were ever found among the sons of men. I did not know that voice of angel ever graced a human form, or that Sephiroth music ever came from human lips." For days he sat entranced. The current of his thought was changed. He thought of nothing but the singer and her songs. He longed to see her once again, and after days she came. She spoke and laid her hand upon his head. Her touch thrilled his soul, and for a time forgot the work that he was sent to do. Few were the words the maiden said. She went her way, but then the heart of Joshua had been touched. A love flame had been kindled in his soul, and he was brought to face the sorest trial of life. He could not sleep, nor could he eat. The thoughts of the maiden came. They would not go. His carnal nature called aloud for her companionship. And then he said, "Lo, I have conquered every foe that I have met, and shall I now be conquered by carnal love? My Father sent me here to show the power of love divine, that love that reaches every living thing. Shall this pure universal love be all absorbed by carnal love? Shall I forget all creatures else and lose myself in this fair maiden, though she is the highest type of beauty, purity, and love?" Into its very depths his soul was stirred, and long he wrestled with his angel idol of his heart. But when the day was almost lost, his higher ego rose in might. He found himself again, and then he said, "Although my heart shall break, I will not fall in this my hardest task. I will be victor over carnal love." And when again the maiden came and offered him her hand and heart, he said, "Fair one, your very presence thrills me with delight. Your voice is benediction to my soul. My human self would fly with you and be contented in your love. But all the world is craving for a love that I have come to manifest. I must then bid you go, but we will meet again. Our ways on earth will not be cast apart. I see you in the hurrying throngs of earth as minister of love. I hear your voice in song that wins the hearts of men to do better things." And then in sorrow and in tears the maiden went her way, and Joshua was alone again. Instantly the great bells of the temple rang. The grotto blazed with light. The Hierophant himself appeared and said, "All hail triumphant Logos. Hail the conqueror of the carnal love standing on the heights." And he placed in Joshua's hand a scroll on which was written, "Love Divine." Together they passed from the grotto of the beautiful temple, and in the banquet hall a feast was served, and Joshua was the honored guest.
So,
Islam. Any thoughts on that reading?
What's for me personally, this reminds me of not just what Joshua went through, but with the woman and man, you know, focus, but just like life in general, in the sense of the illusions of, you know, maybe you're awakening this knowledge and, you know, you're distracted by, you know, somehow you know processes to, you know, maybe write off this car or something, or get a car because you know how to, you know, do contracts or use UCCs that you've never known about 5 years ago, right? Now you came into this paradigm of knowing, you know, all this knowledge and more. You're distracted by all these, you forget the tasks that you know what I mean? Like you forget the clear objective that you're supposed to be. And it's side singled by this thing, you know, let me try this out, and you get, you know, so indulgent to it, you lose yourself in it, and just in the end, there's nothing comes of it, right? Yeah, nothing comes of it. You gotta go back, all come back to the prophet. It's simple teaching, right? So that's what I took from that. Just stay focused. Once you enter the prophet's paradigm, when he left us, you better stay focused and not stare to the left. You want to stare left, make sure it's the right you're taking instead of the left, right?
Anybody else? Also, too, her touch thrilled all his soul, and for a time forgot the work that he was sent to do. So going back to the same thing that Rennie's saying about the illusions that, you know, once you get onto this side of the information, you're constantly going to be tested. You're either going to be tested physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally. There's going to be, you know, the maidens are going to come, or the young men are going to come with their, you know, words and acts and all these things to try to deter you from where it is that you're supposed to go. And you have to know your purpose. You have to know what it is that you're here for, so you don't get caught up. You know, it's as easy as there was a brother who came into this information, and he was still with the crew or whatever, right? And you know, it was only him in the information, so you know you're gonna still be dibbling and dabbling with some people or whatever. So end up getting a ride from somebody, and he ended up getting 2 years because they found stuff under the seat, stuff in the trunk, and you're with him, so you're going too. And that was that, right? All because he already knew that guy for sure always has the stuff on him. You know, being in this new frame of mind, certain things you're gonna have to sever ties with people. You have to sever ties with organizations, certain associations that we've had. We're gonna have to sort of put back. You know, we're gonna have to sort of put back, because it does not match up with where we are spiritually, where we are mentally. And you know, once you get to this side, the lessons are harsher, right? It's not gonna be, you know, a slap on the wrist on this side. Once you get on this side, once you get on the side of righteousness and you think you can go do some devilish stuff even though you're righteous, your punishment is going to be worse than the devil himself getting punished. So make sure that you know that you have a journey, you have a purpose, and things that are in harmony with that journey and purpose is where you should be as far as your affiliations. Nothing's wrong with going to see friends, chill with the brothers, chill with the sisters, or whatever. But once you get to a certain level mentally, you don't have that leeway anymore. Now you're completely responsible now for all of your actions. Doesn't matter what you think that they are, whether they're good or bad or whatever. It's the frequency of it. And that was from the Mysteries of the Silent Brotherhood of the East, which is the higher degrees of the Circle 7 Quran and the 101 questionnaire. And they remind me to give you guys that too, a copy of the Quran, so you have that too. And it's basically just going through the different lessons that Yoshua had to go through to get to that place where he was considered, Allah and man, God on earth, or whatever the case is. And remember that he himself said that greater men are going to come do stuff greater than he did. So don't look at him as he's somebody. You know what I mean? There's always going to be somebody, someone greater. It's just like in the streets, there's always a guy with a bigger gun than you or a badder man than you. If you think you're the man, if you're a bad man, there's a badder man, and that bad man, you can't win. You can't win. So if there's any questions or comments before we close out, take one or two questions. Do you have any questions back there, Mike?
Brother Walter told me how when we get the birth certificate and stuff like that, because of the stock market, and we have a trust account and stuff like that. How do you get access to our money?
Well, first of all, that real money is gold and silver, and they're not giving. Yeah, they're not giving any of that. Yeah, they're not giving any of that. So the concept of
so we can't get access to our trust. It's
no, that's their trust. That's not your trust. People mistake it as theirs because they're still tying themselves to that name on the birth certificate that they think is them, when that's not them, because that name is not written grammatically correct. And when you go check all those instruments, the name is not written grammatically correct. So none of those instruments represent you. Only you represent you. And the whole thing with the trust account and whatever like that is based on fraud from its inception. Because the birth certificate is a fraudulent instrument because it was only signed by one party. And then if it was signed by multiple parties, the multiple parties who signed weren't, the multiple parties that signed it weren't there for the signing. They signed it later, which means it's not a legitimate contract because it's supposed to be signed by all parties at the time of its inception. So once it becomes a void instrument, then anything attached to it is going to be void. So all that stuff that they're talking about, getting your money from the account of the whatever and all that stuff, all that is based in fraud. So you going to do that, let's just say there is this thing. go get the money from the birth certificate, right? Anybody who claims that, ask them to show you the account. Because I can't tell you, I'm a barber, and you come to the house and I'm telling you to sit on the bed to cut the hair, right? Tell you lay down in the tub and give you a haircut. You're not gonna look at me as I'm a real barber, because that's not how it goes. So the same thing with that thing. As soon as they start talking like that, ask them to show you them doing the process, and that they have the account that's unlimited with $1 million in it so that you can discharge all your debts. They could never show you that, because there's no such thing. No one who talks like that could show you the account that they got $1 million credit so they could discharge all the debts. And if there is a process like that, and they went through that and they got the $1 million, then why are they charging you to do that? Shouldn't they just discharge all your debts to the stuff that they got? If they got an unlimited credit, why do you need it if they have it? They should just be taking all your debts and putting it in their unlimited credit thing.
You say the trust thing. The trust is a state of mind. Trusting in, not trusting in the act.
I just want some free money.
Yeah, as you said, it's gold and silver. The trust would be the state of mind. Like, trusting in this movement that God created, and just putting your trust in that.
Putting your trust in the Creator, putting your trust in your intelligence, putting your trust in the people around you. But when you start talking about a document called a trust, that's for you to be able to pass your stuff down to your beneficiaries. The trust isn't for you in this life. The trust is so that the descendants can have something. That's why you would have a trust. The reason why they have a trust is so that they can have control. Remember, they said that the indigenous people don't own the land; that land owns them. So when you say buy a car, and you go through the motions and you register it, and then they give you the ownership, and you get the plates, and you got the license, and you say, "Yeah, I got my car." That's not your car. That's their car. That's in trust. You're just holding it because they can't hold it, because they can't be a trustee and a beneficiary at the same time. So they make you the custodian of it, but they become the beneficiary of it, because you're the one who went and registered it with them. Right? You took it to them and said, "I want to register this," and they said, "Fine. What's the whatever?" And then they take the number of the VIN, they put that in the trust, and then they give you the ownership, and now you get to use the car as if you're the owner, but you're not an owner, because the owner wouldn't have registration papers. The owner would have papers from the manufacturer. The owner would have a manufacturer's certificate of origin to show that it's their car, not registration papers. Right? A house owner would have a deed of trust, not a deed, or not some mortgage papers. Right? When you look at the thing that they're doing, it's all part of the colonial activity. Get the people to not know what's going on, so that they can start pushing these papers on people, and then everybody signing away all their rights, signing away all their liberties, signing away all their property under the guise of registration, social insurance, whatever, health, free health, whatever like that. If they and if you use health, for example, as the example, free healthcare lets you know that everything's free already. Everything's already paid for. That's why when you said with the money, when you go to the store, you put down, that's not money you're putting down. You're just putting down paper that everybody agrees that this is money, but that's not really money. So with everybody putting that down and everybody accepting it, it appears like you're buying stuff and somebody's selling something, when that's not what's going on. Everything's paid for. You're getting everything for free. It's the illusion that this paper is worth money that people are attached to, when they should really be attached. Like, you know, like when they say job, and people say, yeah, I went to work and they only paid me whatever. Well, what is the job? You know, the job is for you to be getting something done, right? Now, if you're doing something that you love, the job shouldn't even be based in finance. It should be based in what are you feeling from what you're doing, you know? Somebody who, for example, like the brother with Peer Later, right? Getting the package to the individual in the proper time, that their stuff's not messed up or whatever like that, is the job, not getting paid, right? Making sure somebody's mail arrives on time is the job, not I got a paycheck to drop this mail off, you know? Driving the bus.
So we're always going to be a slave to the system, basically.
As far as what?
In terms of having to use their, like we just mentioned, like a car registration, it can be a license.
No, you don't have to do that.
Okay.
That's not what you have to do. That's what they've created for people to do. But that's not what people have to do. You know, I mean, they can go through the motions of not registering it and keeping their property to themselves and creating the documents that they would create in order for them to exercise. But, you know, if you're going to do that, you can't do that halfway. You know, which is why we're saying that it's a thing based in time, because your knowledge is what's going to make you be able to do certain things. It's not going to be, you got this paper from that guy over there, so that means I can do this.
Right.
It's going to be, I have the knowledge of how a chainsaw works, so I can use a chainsaw. Not that guy over there who's the master chainsaw guy gave me a chainsaw, and because it came from him, that means all I got to do is pull the thing, and then now I could go and do whatever I want. And you probably end up cutting your foot off or something like that, cutting your hand off, because you don't have the knowledge of what it is that you're doing. You know what I mean?
Last question. So this treaty that we have with the UN for human rights and you're talking about, is it only just the UN treaty with the Moors? What happens to all the other tribes that were there before that particular group?
That's why it says indigenous.
Okay, so it belongs to like all of these
Everybody.
tribes.
Anybody who's claiming indigenous,
Okay.
these
like,
rights apply to them.
particular tribe in per se. Okay.
Yeah. You know, the confusion comes in because when you look up Moor, it tells you a Moor is any dark-skinned person. So what does that mean about Nigerians? What are they? So what does that mean then? If Moor means any dark-skinned person, then what does that mean about Nigerians?
Some of them are. Right? Some of them are.
Why would it be some?
Well, you just said dark skin. There's like Nigerians that are like naturally light skinned people.
Oh, well, what
Right?
when you
But
say light
said
skin?
that are more is somebody who's considered somebody that's dark in pigmentation.
Yeah.
Right? But then there's Afrikaans, people that are in the motherland that are Africans, but they're very light skinned, almost like white people, but they're not white people.
Mm.
So then what would you classify them as?
What is the other?
They're just light skinned, they're just fair.
No, but what's their mom?
Your mom is fair.
Yeah, but fair is not a nation.
Okay. You're saying dark. When you say dark, you're looking at somebody that looks like you, somebody that looks like you.
No, when I say dark, anything that's not European.
Okay, well they're not European, but they have like they're just,
No.
no, they're black people. They're just very light.
They're how it's not. But you gotta actually, white is status.
Yeah.
White is not, that's where you gotta call the police because
Maybe I should use the word light skin. Maybe I should just say very brown skin. I don't know.
Yeah, but isn't brown dark though? Brown's
No, but
dark.
they're not dark. Like when you look at it, they look like they're Caucasians, but they're not Caucasians. There's a lot of tribes.
Okay.
They have melanin. They're just on
Okay,
the
so-
light spectrum of just.
Okay, so
blackness, I guess.
so let's say two dark-skinned people have somebody that's light as their child.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
All right. So you are who your mom is.
Yeah, I understand that.
All right. So if their mom is dark-skinned, doesn't matter how they look. They're dark-skinned.
No, but I think what I'm trying to say is we have this conception that people that are from that part of the world look like you and me. And there are tribes in that part of the world that will look nothing like us. And if you see them, you think that they're Europeans, but they're not Europeans. They're just very fair-skinned black people, if we want to use that term black.
Right.
Right. So if you're saying that the treaty is with indigenous people that are supposed to be dark skinned, then that leaves them out because they are not dark skinned, but they're still aborigines and indigenous to that part of the world without any colonization of any.
But that's why it doesn't specify on the thing of dark or light.
Okay.
We're bringing up the dark because the term Moor means any dark-skinned person. But dark doesn't just mean brown or black.
Dark hue through to the lightest. Right.
It's dark, right? The only thing that's
because
not.
when you say that, like, it brings that division that if you are not a dark-skinned person, then you are not that.
No, that's what the European colonization, because anything that's not pale is dark. So, for example, these shoes are dark, even though it's green. Right? Do you get what I'm saying? Yeah, right? So the idea of the indigenous people only applies to the originals.
Okay.
And there's no pale leaves. Leaves are green. There might be pale petals or whatever, right? Yeah, you know what I mean. But when does that happen? That happens when they're dying off. And even if you're looking at a tree with red leaves, those red leaves are still dark, right? And then think about the idea of we say the colonial mindset, that somebody's saying that this hat is a light skin this, that they can't be light and dark in the same thing. You know, and you can't have a light skin dark thing. That doesn't even exist. It's either dark or it's light. You know, so the practices that we've adopted of people are shades of skin is a fiction. People are actually identified by their nation. People are identified by their tribe before how they look or how they're perceived to be.
That we say the teacher did that.
Yeah, they did a number. They did a number.
I think in this part of the world, like we have that colorism and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Whereas from that side of the world, we don't have that.
So that,
But now that this westernization stuff is perpetuated in the continent again, it's starting to become a problem where it was never a problem before. Because like from when we grew up, when you're fair skinned, you automatically assume like we call them Zulus, right? Which is you have like Asian, like whatever name that we have for them stuff, right? So there was never really that operation where or if you're light skinned, you're treated better in the house because you're fairer than your dark skinned brother is. Like that was never a problem in the continent until the last maybe 20, 30 years, where a lot of people are coming back and you're bringing this Western
idea back.
That your light skin is very just like, the darker you were, like the more attractive you were. Like, you know, like you rather go, you know what I mean? So like now I'm just like, where is this?
But
And it's like a complete opposite in the States, right?
The spectrum.
Right, but it's completely opposite in the States, where the lighter you are, the more, I guess, accepted that you are. Whereas back home, if you're light, like you kind of put you aside. But like now it's kind of like turning to flip, you know, where the embracement of darker pigmentation people are coming back in the States, and then the embracement of lighter pigmentation people are being embraced back in the motherland.
Right.
So like it's like the whole shit, like it's flipping. It's weird.
Yeah, that's one of the master teachers makes the statement that the sorcerers did a good job when it comes to our people. And for us to recognize that, you know, we think that we're battling some racist Europeans. We're battling sorcerers. We're battling, you know, warlocks and magicians and stuff like that. That's who the battle's against. You know, and we need to get our magic up so we can battle.
Yeah, we just know that magic.
Yeah. Peace and love, Mars.